So on Saturday, the British and Irish Lions are playing against an Australia and New Zealand invitational team in Adelaide. So this game originally, I think, was meant to be the Melbourne Rebels, but they've gone into administration. So instead, it's an invitational team that they're playing against, but it's also the last time that we'll see the British and Irish Lions go out to play before the first test. So we're going to have a good look at the squad that's been named to play against the Australia and New Zealand invitational team. And we're also going to try and read into what this may mean for the first test. So this is the side that Andy Farrell's named, and it was a case in the week of whether he was going to go effectively full noise against the Brumbies or in this game, and he appeared to do it against the Brumbies. But looking at this team, what it is for me is it's a mixture of players that probably aren't going to be in that first test squad and some players that are still trying to nail their shirt down to potentially be in that first test squad. So starting up front, this is who he's picked to be the pack against the Australia-New Zealand team. Now, up front, they've gone with Schoeman, Cowan-Dickie and Stewart. So interestingly, Will Stewart is starting. I suspected it might have been Finlay Bealham, given that sub-front row from Wednesday of Kelleher, Porter and Stewart looked like it's potentially the first test front row. I don't know whether this is a case of, one, giving Will Stewart some more minutes at tight head, or is it a case of seeing how Finlay Bealham gets on coming on at tight head off the bench? Because I wouldn't say it's completely concrete who's even starting at tight head. I reckon it's probably Tadhg Furlong, but in the case of who's going to be the sub front row behind him, I think that could be Stewart or Bealham. So we'll have to see how they go in this game. In the second row, Tadhg Beirne captains. Again, Tadhg Beirne not had the best tour, but I wouldn't entirely rule him out of being in the Test 23 either. I think he's got a lot of credit in the bank. James Ryan's playing. I think James Ryan is probably looking like a midweek player at the moment. Cummings has been going well. Itoje, Chessum and McCarthy were all really good, I thought, this week. McCarthy was man of the match, I think, against Western Force. So there's tons of competition in the second row. And then when you look in the back row, it's Henry Pollock, Jack Morgan and Ben Earl. Now, I personally think that one of Pollock or Earl will make that test squad. I don't know which one it's going to be, but I think with the sort of dynamic of players that they've got, I reckon that 20 shirt will go to either Henry Pollock or Ben Earl. So I think it's almost a bit of a head-to-head contest as to who is going to get that out of those two. And I think it really is uncertain at this point because they've both done some pretty good stuff on the tour. And at 7, Jack Morgan, who has been decent actually on this tour and has really put his hand up as a 7. I think it could be any of him, Tom Curry or Josh van der Fleer that plays 7. I think Jack Morgan actually has a really good chance of being in that Test 23, so we'll see how he goes in this pack on Saturday morning. Looking at the backs, what we've got here is Ben White and Finn Smith 9-10. Now, Ben White has obviously he's come in for Thomas Williams. I don't anticipate him being in that Test 23. I think Mitchell being on the bench is quite deliberate to see what impact he makes when he comes on. You'd think Gibson Park is going to start in the first test with Mitchell behind him. So you've got Ben White starting here, maybe having a look at Mitchell's impact, and then Finn Smith at 10. I think Finn Smith's probably the outsider maybe at this point, especially given the injury to Elliot Daly. How quickly will Blair Kinghorn recover? Is Hugo Keenan going to get through entirely fit? I think having Marcus Smith there as a backup on the bench with all those factors, I think potentially Finn Smith is going to be a midweek player, but we'll see how he goes in this game because I wouldn't entirely rule him out. The centres, I think it's going to be either the Irish or the Scottish. That's pretty much what everyone's saying, and I don't think the Scottish are playing in this game because the Irish have got that those shirts nailed down. I frankly think that Farrell is having another look at these two before he makes the decision. So the Irish centres played against the Brumbies. These two played on the Saturday beforehand, whoever they played then. I think it was the Waratahs, and they're playing again on Saturday. So centres, proper 50-50 call, I think. Personally, I think I would go with the Scottish ones, but I wouldn't be mad either way. And then you look in the back three, Van der Merwe, Hansen, Keenan. Now, Keenan, I think success for Hugo Keenan is he just stays fit. If he stays fit and gets through, I think that's going to be enough for everyone because Keenan now, with Daly out, Kinghorn potentially injured, is looking like you're starting fullback for the first test. So Keenan just needs to frankly stay fit. I'm not that bothered how he plays, just needs to be fit. And then Van der Merwe, you think, is probably, with the way he's played on the tour, he's probably looking at being a midweek player. And Mac Hansen, he was the number 23 in the week. Andy Farrell seems to like him. He could be in that Test 23. The 23 shirt, I reckon, was Elliot Daly's for the first test, but now it is really open for some competition. And looking at the replacements, Kelleher, Porter, Beelum. So that, Kelleher, Porter were the subs in the midweek game. Beelum is on the bench here. I spoke about that before. I really do think at tight head, it's far from concrete. Scott Cummings is on the bench. Cummings, I think, still maybe has an outside chance. He probably will be a midweek player, but has an outside chance. He's not had a poor tour. He was pretty good in the last game that he played, actually. Josh van der Fleer's on the bench. You can come on and see what impact he makes as well. And then Alex Mitchell, you'd think, would be on the bench in the first test with Marcus Smith and Owen Farrell, the number 23. Is Owen Farrell an outside shout to be that number 23 in the first test? Farrell, of course, has the versatility to play 10 and 12 and is the only player there that I think is now on his fourth tour. So huge experience, brought in quite deliberately. A couple of people mad about it, a couple of people quite understanding. I am very much Team Owen Farrell. He's an outstanding player. I'm pretty glad he's coming on this tour. I know he's not necessarily like for Elliot Daly, but I'm quite keen to see how he goes. Will he come on at 10? Unlikely, I don't know. Maybe depend around injury. Will he come on at 12 to give Tuipulotu a rest? We shall see. But one thing for certain is that the team that they're playing are not daft. Like, this team is pretty noisy. You look at this Australia-New Zealand invitational team. You've got Tumunga Allen and Salah Carlotta, who played for the Queensland Reds the other day. They're involved. The back row, Shannon Frizzell, Pete Samu, Hoskins Tutu, like that is a proper back row. That you've got Cora Betty on the wing, you've got Lau Mape playing as well. You just look through that squad; it's a really, really decent squad. I think they probably will play like a Barbarians brand of rugby against the Lions, and I think they will really give them a test. I don't think this will be another one of those games where the Lions like crawl through the first half and then pull away in the second half. I think these are really going to stay on the lines, give them a lot of trouble. But yeah, it's quite exciting to see a side of this strength coming in before the first test and giving the Lions a real run for the money. And just as a concise final point, I think there are positions that are nailed down for the first test now, and I think there are a couple that are still a bit up in the air. And the most notable ones for me that are up in the air, I think, is 7. I think is still up in the air. I think the centres are, and I think fullback to some extent is. The other positions, I think there are probably favourites to play in them now in terms of the test starting 15. I'll have a look at this on YouTube in the next week before the first test. I'll have a look at who I potentially will predict who the 23 are going to be, or my 23, something like that. But I think there's still a couple of positions there where it's not entirely certain who it's going to be. So let's see how this game goes, and I'll be back on YouTube for another post-game chat review.